Well, that was our first foray into an unbelievable live from Soul Train background. Do not get used to the technology because that was a gift for tonight's SIP episode with two very, very special guests. Doug Rutherford is in the house. Ilse Godinez, sorry about that. Eric and Laura Klein back in the saddle. Gladys Bolden, Hans and Caitlin Greasy, Jan Kiefer, Jeff and Jane Greasy. And Jeff and Jane Greasy, by the way, this is SIP episode 53. Jeff has not missed a single episode. So he has been on all 52. This is his 53rd. This is his birthday. Told his family he didn't want to celebrate tonight because he wanted to not miss a single episode of SIP. So he's going to celebrate the birthday tomorrow night. So I'm going to sing Jeff happy birthday in a voice that he is so fond of from high school, Marilyn Monroe. Happy birthday to you. That's as far as I'm going because Jane is going to be wondering what on earth I'm doing. But happy birthday, Jeff Greasy, who also I think is in fact 53. So it's weird that he is the same age as the SIP broadcast. I like that. I am looking for another special effect, so we'll come back to that in a second. I want to introduce tonight that's going to be joining us the two folks that we've had that actually have combined triple, quadruple the wine and food knowledge that I ever hope to possess. John Laloganes, wine educator, author, is going to be joining us this evening, and Chef Wook Kang. They're going to be preparing dishes from a comparison contrast of oak versus unoaked Chardonnay. We're going to take wine into the kitchen. And let's be honest, this is usually where we have a lot of our wine to begin with because food and wine brings people together. So we usually all end up in the kitchen at some point in time during a party. Comparison contrast of oak versus unoaked Chardonnay. We're going to take wine into the kitchen. And let's be honest, this is usually where we have a lot of our wine to begin with because food and wine brings people together. So all right, that's the last time we hire an intern. That was unbelievably tacky. We apologize. It is still Jeff's birthday. John and Wook are actually co-founders of a fantastic blog called Feeding the Soul because that's Chef Wook. Again, we can have words afterwards. You got me thrown off my track. I'm happy these two are here because they've got more wine knowledge, more cooking knowledge, and this is exactly what we always get asked a lot of questions on: wine and food. What do I pair with this? Why am I pairing this with this? And so we thought, what better way to do that than oak versus unoaked Chardonnay? For those of you that are joining us for the first time, who and what is Cellar Angels besides technology morons? Cellar Angels is a direct-to-consumer wine company. We curate fine wines from Napa and Sonoma that are not available in a retail setting on a national basis. So when you think about great wines, you think about Napa and Sonoma because it's arguably the most famous valley in the world. That right here is our website. So those of you that are drinking oaked versus unoaked Chardonnay, they got them because of the SIP virtual tasting kit. So you can go on right now, grab a SIP kit on the cellarangels.com website. You will get 5 or 6 wines sent to you, and you will be set for the next 5 or 6 Fridays, depending upon how we have the SIP kit configured. You can actually see we had some wines recently where we discussed clones. We're going to talk a little bit about a clone tonight. And then you can scroll on down to see the Tonti Chardonnay and the Knightsbridge Chardonnay. Those are the 2 wines that we're going to be reviewing tonight with food. I'm really, really looking forward to this. This is actually what great wine discussion and education and fun is all about. This is the most entertaining hour in wine. We drink serious wines. We just don't take ourselves too seriously. Peter Glick, Nick Schramm, Mark Challenor, Linda Forsyth, Catherine Jurica, Jim Brubaker. Jim, you're supposed to be at a wedding. That's interesting. That's next week. Okay. I was going to say, you might have some explaining to do if you ducked out to watch a SIP episode, but I like it. So without much further ado, 2 of our favorite guests, 2 of our favorite people in the Chicagoland area. Let's get it started with John Laloganes, Sommelier, Educator, and Chef Wook Kang from Feeding the Soul. Gentlemen, how are you? Good to see you.
Woo! Hey, thanks for having us.
They have better technology than we do. They're in front of a live studio audience.
Hey, what's going on out there? Not true. We are talking about Chardonnay today, right? Is that it? Chardonnay?
We are talking about Chardonnay.
Well, very good. And, just wanted to say thank you again for having us. Chef Wook and I, We were on for the like pre-Thanksgiving episode, I believe it was.
Been a while.
It's been a little bit of while, but we're glad. Apparently, we did something nice, and you brought us back. And hello, everyone out there. So, yeah, we're focused on Chardonnay today, right?
I think so.
I think so. So, Chardonnay is one of the most popular and widely planted grapes in the world. I'm sure many of you out there probably have an opinion of Chardonnay. You know, the best part about Chardonnay is that this grape varietal expresses many kind of expressions, a sense of place. We'll talk more about this later, but this varietal has stood the test of time and is regarded as a noble varietal. And what do you think?
Well, for me, I think it's so popular that your average diner and drinker, maybe not this crowd, right, goes to a restaurant and uses the term Chardonnay pretty much as a synonym, right? It's usually a synonymous with the phrase white wine. And usually as in, I'll have white wine, meaning that they're thinking automatically that it's going to be Chardonnay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have found Chardonnay to be one of the probably most divisive of grape varietals.
Well, let's see which side you fall on. On the one side, there are many
Yes,
people that
me,
love Chardonnay.
You, I think Martin. And on the other side, what's the other side of it? Ask yourself if you're on this other side. There's some that are very vocal, highly vocal consumers and critics that really dislike Chardonnay. They kind of revolt against it. I mean, have any of you heard of that whole movement, the ABC movement? Y'all know ABCs? Martin's going to sing it because he tried to sing some Marilyn Monroe, but the ABC is short for, do you know what it's short for?
I don't.
Anything but Chardonnay.
Oh my gosh.
And some would say anything but Cabernet. Have you heard of that movement? I think it's an awful movement, but you know, here's the thing.
I do remember it because I remember it when we used to own the wine shop, people would come in and say that.
Yeah. And you know, it's kind of sad. And the reason I think it's sad is because it's sort of misunderstood. Originally, it was all about, kind of came about with this woman, Laura Holmes, in 2008, wrote a book, ABC, and it was about anything but Chardonnay and Cabernet. The whole reason she was writing that, the premise of the book was to say, hey, there's other varietals out there. Because as you know, Chardonnay and Cabernet are so popular, they're so famous, they're so widespread. But then that started a movement. Because then people sort of mistook that for, oh, so Chardonnay is not good to drink. It's not cool, you know? So.
Okay. Now I remember this. So many people did take that book and the movement to mean that Chardonnay is of low quality.
Yeah.
And or you're not very sophisticated, right? If you're not drinking what everybody else drinks.
Yeah.
So obscure is cool and Chardonnay apparently was not.
Yeah. Well, ABC 1.0 was this reaction to the grape's popularity and dominance in the marketplace, right? But really, there came about much a little bit after that was ABC 2.0. And this was now a sort of revolt that was really brought on by younger sommeliers, wine directors, people in the industry that were starting to have a reaction to promote don't drink Chardonnay because of the style. And they were saying that Chardonnay now is becoming, you know, too oaky, too buttery, too rich. And from my perspective, Chardonnay is just misunderstood by some people and probably misguided. And as with any grape varietal, from Cab to Pinot to Syrah, there's great versions and there's some not so great versions. So I really just think it's a matter of misalignment or misunderstanding. But personally, I love Chardonnay. Chef, what's your perspective?
Thanks, John. You know, long time ago, and when we used to work together at
another place.
Right, at another place. There was a time where, you know, I wasn't much of a big wine drinker. And until I grew up, if you will, right? There was someone, Peter Mondavi. He came to the school and he was promoting his wine. And I really fell in love with Chardonnay. And before I would, you know, I think most people, I think in their earlier stages of wine drinking, they would drink just kind of whatever spoke to them, right? And I was really much the same way. And until he came, he spoke about his vineyard and he also went into detail of his wine. And when I was tasting that Chardonnay, I really, really kind of fell in love with that. And it was so different than any other Chardonnay that I ever drank before. And with that, you could say was my first real white wine.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it's
you started off with a good one, right? I
Right.
mean, my first Chardonnay that I remember was Kendall Jackson Vintners Reserve Chardonnay at the Walgreens for about $11.99. But
it's
it's fine, you know?
and you were 18 when you acquired that bottle too with the big ID. So I think we weren't too far behind because I'm familiar with that whole Jackson family of wines and the Vintners Reserve. I actually did a speech on the Vintners Reserve in college, oddly enough. But one of the things that is interesting is Chardonnay did have these ups and downs and peaks and valleys with regards to popularity, but it still has remained strong. I mean, it's the fifth most planted grape in the world. So clearly that dominance maybe took a couple marketing image hits, but it's pretty profound.
Yeah, and just a side note on that too. I mean, when you think about famous places around the world, some would say it's the second most popular widespread grape in France after Aran, which is used for distillation. It's the number one varietal in Sonoma County. It's the number one white varietal in Napa Valley. It's the most significant white varietal in Australia. I mean, the list goes on and on and on with its dominance and its major variations of expressions around the world. So I want to say something very important, everybody. I want to thank Chef for his insight to top off this moment here. But we're going to say farewell to Chef because Chef is going to go cook food for us. I mean, for you, kind of. For me,
Right.
yeah. And he's going to go finalize the dishes in the kitchens. He will be back. So don't worry. Don't tune out now because I know you're all here for Chef Wook and the hat. It's all about the hat.
It really is,
Yeah.
right? Thanks, John.
So he will be back in about 20 minutes. So give us just a moment. And it's just for you,
Awesome.
Martin, for a second.
Okay, I'm going to actually show some folks. A couple weeks ago, we did a tasting comparison and contrasting, and we studied French origins, and we focused on Burgundy. And as you know, we've talked a lot about Mother Nature, specifically as it relates to what Mother Nature can throw to the winemakers with curveballs, what Mother Nature has done to Napa and Sonoma with fires. I want to take a quick second here while Chef departs to go cook some dishes and John gets settled back in. If you haven't seen the news this week with regards to what's happening in Burgundy, I encourage you to Google it after tonight's show. I'll show you a couple pictures. They are experiencing a significant frost warning. So what you see here is they have put fires in the vineyards and they are lighting these fires at night to warm the vines so that the buds, because they've already had bud breaks, so that the buds don't freeze. And they are in danger of losing a significant percentage of the crop in Burgundy. And you don't get to see this too often, and thankfully so, because it's potentially a little bit tragic with regards to what can possibly happen. But it is really something that we hope they're going to be okay. If those of you remember, we focused on Chablis, and we're going to talk a little bit about Chablis tonight. But there was a picture that I showed you from Google Earth when we went walking around, and there was this beautiful church, and you could see the town of Chablis. And now we're looking back from the town up into the vineyards. And you can see that they've got fires in the rows of vineyards to keep the vines warm. So it is a business and a passion not for the faint of heart, because you just never know what Mother Nature's gonna throw at you. And this year, especially for Burgundy, it is very, very tenuous with regards to what's going to happen. So fingers crossed for all of the wine folks out there in Burgundy. And I know Burgundy is really, we're talking about Chardonnay, and Chardonnay, John, hails from the region, obviously, of Burgundy when we talk about comparison and contrasting American, French. So let's get into that with regards to the oak versus unoaked.
You want to jump ahead to that idea?
All right. Either that, or you can just go with what you have after Chef departs, and we're talking a little bit about Chardonnay. We're talking a little bit about the region. So
all right.
So
a little bit of background, kind of digging in just a little bit to the origins and the fame. DNA research conducted by UC Davis. I know it's been discussed on this channel a couple times, and the significance of who they are and what they've done for the wine industry across the world, but certainly in California. They believe that Chardonnay is the result of multiple grapes crossing together through Mother Nature. They believe one of the grapes is Pinot Noir, another grape called Pinot Blanc. You may have heard of it as Pinot Bianco from Italy, and another grape called Gouais Blanc, a rather obscure grape. So the thought is these three grapes really through Mother Nature centuries crossed and created Chardonnay. So Chardonnay is a grape varietal that we know today as extremely adaptable to different climates, but also to different winemaking techniques. Generally speaking, Chardonnay is somewhat neutral, and it is really adaptable, malleable to the winemaker, to the climate. I know maybe it's a bad expression, but I usually like to refer to it as being something like tofu. And that's not meant disrespectfully to either food or the wine, but tofu is sort of like that. It's very neutral, and it really takes on cooking method, sauces, ingredients that you choose to add to it. Chardonnay is very similar to that. So let's talk a little bit back to what Martin was speaking about in terms of places, famous places, right? So you talked about Burgundy. You talked specifically about Chablis. Obviously, the most highest regarded places or expressions of Chardonnay are really France and California. I mean, clearly they're everywhere. Chardonnay is everywhere in the world. But when we talk about Chardonnay from France, the origins are believed to be in the Mâconnais. This is a region in Burgundy, France, or sub-region within Burgundy, France. And within the Mâconnais, there is a appellation called Pouilly-Fuissé. Pouilly-Fuissé. Martin, can you say it?
Pouilly-Fuissé. Come on.
There, you got it. All right, so obviously, Chardonnay is vitally important to Burgundy, but not just in the southern part where Mâconnais is located. It really reaches this sort of pinnacle in the area of Côte de Beaune. And in Côte de Beaune, there's the famous villages of Pouligny-Montrachet or Meursault, very, very famous villages that produce some of what is highly regarded the best of the best Chardonnay in the world, certainly in France. All right. So one other place we need to mention, not just Burgundy, but it's also Champagne. For anybody out there that's a lover of Champagne, I am. I think it's one of the most wonderful styles of wine that we can have, and really bubbly as a whole, but certainly Champagne has such a history and such a prestige. Chardonnay is critical, right? These trio of grapes that make a traditional Chardonnay, the trio of grapes, Chardonnay, of course, but Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Those three grapes form the foundation of the majority of Champagne being produced. But also, Martin, are you familiar with Blanc de Blanc?
Of course.
And Blanc de Blanc loosely translates what?
White from white.
You got it. So there is another style of Champagne that is very famous and considered very elegant and very renowned, and that is the Blanc de Blanc style, which is purely 100% Chardonnay. So when you think about how important Chardonnay is to Burgundy, you can't forget about how important it is to in the northern part in Champagne. So let's go. Go ahead.
I think it's fascinating too, the description. It almost is, I don't know, mirror might be bad of an analogy, because it typifies and mirrors exactly where it's grown. So if it's in different soil types, different climates and different microclimates, it's going to mirror that. If it's certain foods, it's going to mirror and accentuate those foods. So it's a very versatile grape, like you said, which will probably surprise a lot of people. And I think it will surprise a lot of people if they've only been drinking a certain style of Chardonnay that actually can dampen, kind of that expressiveness that Chardonnay is so well known for. And it's your versatility. You just mentioned, you look at Burgundy, you look at Chablis, and you look at Champagne. Yeah. And I mean, that is incredible. It's a very agile grape.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just briefly mention about California, because we can't forget about California. I mean, in fact, our two wines today that we're featuring are both California, of course. And, what really some would say put California, specifically California Chardonnay, California Cabernet on the map, of course, is the very, very famous tasting of the 1976 Judgment of Paris tasting, which people talk about all of the time. I'm sure you've spoken about it many times on the show here. But when you think about how important that tasting was to the winning wine of Chateau Montelena, the winemaker Mike Gergich, if anyone knows the name, and later on goes to open up Gergich Hills. I mean, you think of that sort of foundational event and how significant it was. But here's the thing. It wasn't just Chateau Montelena, right? It was also Chalone Vineyards. It was also Spring Mountain Vineyards. It was also Freemark Abbey. It was Vidercrest. It was Dave Bruce. All of these others were scored in this tasting and were very successful against arguably the best of the French whites, the white Burgundies.
And it was
So,
actually,
yeah.
I mean, it was a fascinating time geopolitically. It was a fascinating time because Americans were still well behind the United Kingdom in consumption of wines from France. And so economically, it was interesting too, because the average price of wine back in 1976 that the American consumer was purchasing was in this $5 to $7 range. And so this was essentially, and there was jug wine, a lot of jug wine.
Yeah.
But this was really, as we refer to it often in the industry, is the wine shot heard around the world, was that tasting.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk. Denise just put a link in the chat. Click on that link, it'll open up in another window. And I think after the show tonight, you're going to want to go read that because it's a pretty fascinating little story.
All right, should we jump into kind of aroma and flavors and sort of those climate influences?
Absolutely. Big fan of aroma and flavors and climate influences.
Sounds good. All right. So as we've discussed, Chardonnay is really regarded as a very moldable grape, right? It's sort of that blank canvas. One of the reasons why winemakers, well, there's many reasons why winemakers love this. Number one, the consumer loves it, right? So that's obvious. That's a no-brainer. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business person, let's give the people what they want, right? So Chardonnay is going to uproot other lesser significant grape varietals. So that's number one. But number two, if you're a creative type, whether you're a writer, a poet, storyteller, you're a painter, whatever you are, chef, winemaker, you want to express yourself, right? And part of expressing yourself is bringing in your spin, your riff on said product, such as Chardonnay. So winemakers like how they can take Chardonnay. There's many producers out there that have multiple Chardonnays in their portfolio, and they like to showcase the influence of the different vineyard specific influences. We might be talking elevation differences. We might be talking slope variation. We might be talking completely different regions, not in just different blocks within a single vineyard, but different regions within an area. So let's talk about the primary flavors of Chardonnay, meaning unadulterated.
Let me back up 1 second that you just said. So hypothetically, if you're a winemaker and you are of the ilk that says, okay, I want the vineyard to speak through the grape.
Yeah.
And because I've got special soils, I've got steep slopes, and there's something so unique that you want to be able to express it from the vineyard site and through the grape. Is that what you're talking about with stylistically? You're going to basically be hands off and not do a lot of manipulation is probably strong, but you're not going to do a lot of intervention. You're just going to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's always intervention, I mean, in the crudest form of making wine, I can go buy some grapes at Mariano's and throw them on my table and smash them up and let it sit there for 2 weeks. I can make wine. Yeah. I'm a winemaker. So there is intervention. There is some, manipulation might be perceived as a bad word, but there is always some, right? But the question is how much. Some winemakers talk about a total hands off. It's never hands off, but it's a less involved, Sure. So certainly, and we're going to, I think, discuss that here with this idea. If we could distinguish, broadly speaking, this idea of cooler climate, wherever that might be, let's say Chablis is a great example. And let's say warmer climate. Let's talk Russian River, California, Sonoma County, a little bit warmer. Or we can even conceivably say Knights Valley is regarded as one of the warmer AVAs in Sonoma County. So kind of consider something cooler, maybe Mendocino, and then maybe something a little bit warmer, maybe Knights Valley. So let's kind of use that, or we can say Chablis and broadly speaking California. So you can kind of look at these contrasts in different ways. Chardonnay that's unadulterated is going to give you characteristics of citrus fruit. Lemon is a common one, maybe lime, but mostly lemon. Tree fruits such as apple. Think of like that Granny Smith apple. Pear. All right, that might be a characteristic. And then in those cool kind of climate areas, you're going to really bring out subtle nuances that you're going to detect, which are going to be associated with mineral, like a wet stone, maybe some sort of chalkiness, but that's always kind of subtle. And in theory, you can pick that up in many Chardonnays, but it depends because the climate is going to foster that or not. Meaning, if you have a cooler climate, it's going to showcase itself more. If you have a warmer climate, the grapes are going to be much riper, much bolder, much bigger. We'll talk about that in a second. And it's going to kind of cover up those subtleties. But let's just sort of contrast this with cool climate, warm climate, understanding the basis of Chardonnay, citrus fruit, tree fruit, maybe minerality. Let's kind of look at that to start with. Now, let's think about warmer climates. All right. So still the grape itself, warmer climates are going to gear more towards ripeness. You're going to develop sugars much easier. You're going to develop flavor compounds much easier in a warmer climate. And you're going to change all of those tree fruits, citrus fruits to now more riper fruits associated with tropical, like pineapple, for example, maybe mango, banana. These are some characteristics that tend to come out more so in warmer climates with riper grapes. So think about that for a second. The grape itself, Chardonnay, cooler climate, warmer climate, cooler climate, tree fruit, citrus fruit, warmer climate, tropical fruits. Now the winemaker says, all right, here I am. What do I want to do to this wine? Right? So I have a choice. There's many techniques that I can do as a winemaker to alter the wine, to enhance the wine from my perspective and my vision. In the cooler climate, generally speaking, Chablis is a great example of that. Mendocino County might be a great example of that. More of a hands-off. If we're going to use oak, we don't want new oak because we want to showcase the purity of that cool climate and the purity of that fruit. So if we're going to use oak, we're using old oak. If at all, we might choose to use stainless steel. Forget oak as a whole. Go ahead.
Would this also be if you have a cool climate and you want to not be you don't want to intervene. So the stainless steel is certainly one where you're just going to let the wine or the grapes speak. Concrete egg, similar vein of thinking there, to just not impart any exterior flavors.
Yeah. So let me back up just a little bit, because if you're talking about stainless steel, so stainless steel is the general idea in a cooler climate. Stainless steel removes oxygen. It is what we call a reductive technique. Technical term, like boring. Like, what does that mean? Reductive is a reduction in a reduction of oxygen. So that would be like the purest form of not having any influence, Martin, of anything except for the grape and its climate, right? In the middle, you might kind of go to the concrete egg, because the concrete egg can actually have just a smidgen. Many winemakers consider it this sort of happy medium between the extreme of stainless steel, which is reductive, and the other extreme of oak, which is an oxidative climate. So in the middle, in between those two, you got that concrete egg. All right. But if we're looking at it kind of like a continuum of like how we want to influence or not influence our Chardonnay, we would probably start stainless steel. We could probably progress to some sort of a concrete egg. Then we progress to maybe neutral oak. And then we would go to the extreme of new oak. And so if you look at this kind of continuum, you're going to have dramatic external or not external influence based on what you've chosen with your aging mechanism. All right. Cool climates is generally going to regard stainless steel, concrete egg, and maybe neutral oak as their preference. When you get into warmer climates, the grapes, they had more sugar. So there's potentially more alcohol that you're going to see in the finished product. There's more ripeness. So the grapes themselves have more power, if you will. Therefore, newer oak can hold up to that. You're not going to lose the grape because you've got a bolder grape. So you usually use a greater slather of new oak. One doesn't get lost.
And it's interesting too, because you're right about this continuum metaphor, because I love that, because you can go, we're now in the section of oak. And so now we're talking about, year-old oak, 2-year-old, previously used oak. There's also American oak, French oak, Hungarian oak, new French oak. Is it 70% new, 30% all the way down to 100% new French oak barrels, which are currently about $1,500 a pop. So that's going to greatly influence the price of the Chardonnay. And at that end of the spectrum, I don't know that there's anything more, I don't know on our scale there, what's beyond new French oak to basically enrich, enhance, accentuate, alter, adulterate. I mean, what is out there? Because
it would be American oak. American oak would be the next step, actually, because American oak theoretically is considered the more aggressive of the two.
Right.
Largely because of the way the pores react once you put alcohol in there and how it leaches and extracts out content and also exposes oxygen through those pores. You're going to have a greater influence with the use of that American oak. So that would be the next step. However, most winemakers stick to a classic with Chardonnay. And as you said, using French oak would kind of be the classic. It'll also be heresy to kind of go to the American oak to some degree.
Yeah, I don't think they're using a lot of American oak over in Chablis or Burgundy.
No, that would never happen, of course. But I'm referencing of California. No. Now, there are some California producers. One particular California producer I know about that's located in Carneros that actually uses Hungarian oak. And Hungarian oak is kind of considered the go-between French and American oak. So, but Hungarian oak is not so prominent out there, or Eastern European oak, as it's sometimes referred to as. But this particular producers, if anyone's heard of Poseidon Vineyards, they tend to use that. And that's just because their lineage of the ownership, they're Hungarian. So, of course, you want to impart a little bit of yourself in there,
Interesting you say that. Another producer, Visley Vineyards, also Hungarian, uses a little bit of Hungarian oak because of their namesake and heritage in their Cabernet program. And they were very surprised because they were a little bit more kind of in the purist realm of French oak. But what happened? They loved it.
Yeah.
So
it goes back to the whole artistic mentality of a winemaker. I mean, definitely, however you define what it means to be an artist, right? I kind of define it as your ability to impart something that's creative and that's solely your vision, your perspective. So, winemaker in my mind is an artist, whatever is arguable. But the point is they're creating something that's a representation of themselves that other people can enjoy and interpret and like, not like, enjoy, what have you.
Could the winemaker, from the artistic point of view, knowing that you're in a warmer climate, like we just talked about kind of in California. So if they're in a warmer climate, can they actually pick earlier to reduce the sugar content?
Yeah. I mean, of course, that's kind of the magic thing, right? Is when to pick. And it's really a balance. You're trying to, first and foremost, it's not like you're trying to achieve high alcohol. That's really not the goal. The goal, there's a concept in winemaking, or really actually before the winemaking starts, which is in the vineyard, the whole viticultural aspect. It's a trend that has probably, been present for the last 15 to 20 years called hang time. And the whole concept of hang time is really a new world concept. It wasn't originally a European, it wasn't a French concept. It was a new world concept. The idea of hang time was to let the grapes stay on the vine a little bit longer than what we might normally harvest them in order to develop something called phenolic ripeness. Fancy term for just meaning flavor ripeness. And why would they do this? Because American consumers want to have something that's nice and ripe and flavorful to drink. It just makes sense. I mean, we are brought up and bred on juice and breast milk or milk in general. It's all sweet. And, not that Chardonnay is sweet, but those riper aromas and flavors give you a perception of sweetness. So that concept of hang time is pretty critical, Martin, because they want to develop riper flavors and aromas. The consequence of that is you also have more sugar now. And then therefore you got to ferment this dry. So when you go to ferment all that sugar dry, now you've got a Chardonnay that's 14.1% alcohol, 14.5% alcohol, right? And
how much of
a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. It's just that it's just going to give you a wine that's got more power.
Well, and we've talked about it many times on the show. High alcohol is not terrible when in balance.
Yeah.
With everything else. I mean, it's okay if you see something that says 14.7, even 15.0 with regards to the alcohol content. Could be warmer climate. as you just talked about, from a ripeness standpoint. But if the acid is there, if the tannin is there, if the fruit is there, and you don't notice the singular note of the burning of the alcohol, I'm okay with it. And it's interesting, we're talking climate, which is a fantastic segue, because in a couple of weeks, we're going to be talking climate change specific and its impact on winemaking. So John is hitting it right on the head right now with regards to warmer climate versus cool climate. What else? Should we get into it?
Yeah, you want to talk about the two broad styles more in detail now? You want to go to the... Yeah. Okay. All right. So everybody, the way that I kind of approach this, let's back up. I wrote a book in 2009, and it was called The Essentials of Wine with Food Pairing Techniques. And part of my experience in not only the industry and running restaurants and running wine programs, but also educating students of all different ages and all different ethnicities and races. And I mean, I've taught everybody from all different levels and different walks of life. And what I found, or what I was always given, I guess, in my own head, is the mission is to, how do I present a complex topic really straightforward? How do I present it in a way that's going to make people understand it, providing a foundation to which then they can build that knowledge? And that's really the premise of an educator, right? So what I came up with was a way to kind of stereotype Chardonnay in two broad ways. Now, keep in mind, nobody wants to be stereotyped, but for purposes of making sense of Chardonnay, I use these two stylistic approaches. And the first one is called the Chablis style, and the second one is the Burgundian style. Now, you may say, well, wait a second, that's confusing. What's confusing about that, Martin?
It's not confusing. This is a very intelligent crowd. We compared and contrast Chablis and Burgundy a couple of weeks back. They know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, here's the thing. Chablis is in Burgundy. But what I'm trying to say, right, as you're getting, is that Chablis style, even though it's a part of Burgundy, it never goes by Burgundy. You would never call a Chablis white Burgundy. That would just be wrong. That would be disrespectful. A Chablis is a Chablis. And Chablis, so while that's northern Burgundy, we're going to call it Chablis, the Chablis style. Farther north, almost removed from Burgundy, probably closer to miles outside. Yeah. I was going to say probably closer to Paris, maybe, but here's Chablis. And then the Burgundian style further south, theoretically, thinking south, if you're understanding, right? You're moving south, you're moving closer to the equator, even though it's not significant, but it is enough to say we have warmer spots. We're going to develop more ripeness, even though ripeness is still a challenge in Burgundy. So you're looking at these two broad styles, at least from my perspective, for the purpose of educating. So with the Chablis style, we're talking about a lighter version of Chardonnay. We're talking about a style that is sort of a leaner, more precise, more crisp version of Chardonnay. Your body of a Chablis style is nowhere near. Matter of fact, it's probably complete opposite of, say, a typical California wine from Sonoma County. So a Chablis style is one that is leaner, and it's going to showcase grape varietal, cooler climate, therefore greater expression of that very famous soil that they call Kimmeridgian soil, which is an old seabed where there's actual crustaceans embedded in the soil, years of erosion. You're going to actually pick up nuances of minerality in a Chablis. Therefore, Chablis is more subtle. It's not in your face. It's more laid back. Therefore, winemakers, they don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose that. So therefore, the use of new oak, not really going to happen unless you're in the Grand Cru level of Chablis, where you're on a special site that gets you more ripeness and more sun. But the vast majority of Chablis, no, it's a hands-off. It's either stainless steel or it's neutral oak. It's a really hands-off type of approach, so you don't overpower the varietal. Okay. Anything you want to... Go ahead.
No, so I'm with you on the Chablis style. Okay. And I like that. I did not know that some of the Grand Crus, because they were higher up, warmer, so they're going to use some oak.
Yeah, largely it's their orientation and their aspect towards the sun, and the steepness of the hill that really captures the sun's rays. So they are using more new oak in the Grand Crus. Grand Crus, you'd be surprised. Excuse me, you'd be surprised at the Grand Crus. Granted, there's not a big percentage of Grand Cru Chablis available, but that could give the southern part, the white Burgundies, a little bit of a run for their money. But of course, it's a price issue. So, but the majority of Chablis, not so much. Neutral oak is kind of the way to go, or stainless steel. All right. So in terms of, go ahead. Yeah, so the Chablis style. So let's counter that now with that other style that I made mention of, and that's the Burgundian style. Now, this is just a broad term, right? To differentiate those two. So with Burgundian style, you're dealing with grapes that are more fully ripe. All right, they're riper. So therefore, they have more flavor ripeness. They have more sugar, which is going to equate to, in theory, maybe a little bit more alcohol. Generally not like California, though, but still higher than, say, in theory, would be Chablis. So therefore, the grapes themselves are riper. They're a little bit more powerful, which means winemakers have the ability to apply a little bit more liberal use of new oak and other techniques. So the issue isn't just oak. We need to kind of explore this, Martin. There's three very, very important techniques that Chardonnay is associated with. Not as much in Chablis.
I was going to say, this is an impromptu poll question.
Yeah.
But it's not a poll question because it's not a poll question. But the answer could be written in the chat. So I think there are three distinct, and I'm just going to call them interventions, if you will, in the process that you can influence Chardonnay with. And I'm going to give, if anybody can name all three, I will send you some wine. Actually, let me retract that.
You can send him $10?
Nope.
Oh,
nope.
okay.
Tried that last week and 400 people won. It was not a worthwhile endeavor. Actually, I'll give you one of the three. And if you can name the other two, I'll be impressed. One of the three, I'm guessing, John, would be malolactic fermentation.
Yes. So we're talking three techniques done to Chardonnay in the actual winery, right? One of them you just gave everyone was what?
Malolactic fermentation.
You got it. And what is the acronym? ML or MLF? Great. What are the other? I don't know how to count. What are the other two, everybody? The other two techniques. One of them should be easy. One of them should be easy.
Really? One of them should be easy.
Well, one of them should be easy because we've just been talking about it.
Use of
OG. So Jeff and Jane. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. What else?
Birthday boy.
Well, he's kind of jazzed up because of your singing.
And Julie, barrel selection.
Look at Nick. I saw someone else say that.
Look at Nick Schramm dust off the old appendix of wine knowledge.
Right. Like Googling. Is anyone Googling? Has anyone got their phone on there? I would.
Doug with the right answer and extra credit of Sir Lees and Cooperage.
Yeah. Yeah. So are we ready to talk? Should we talk about it?
I like Jim's intervention. Price. 100%.
Whoever's buying.
Yeah, the price matters. But no, okay, so we've got malolactic fermentation.
Malolactic fermentation, MLF, yeah.
Yep. Go ahead. What's the second one?
Second one was one we've been talking about, which is oak. Somebody mentioned barrel selection. Yeah, I mean, and that's a whole hole you can go down. Kind of what I do sometimes when I sort of do Wikipedia Chicago Cubs and I look at like the managers and, and I go down this dark hole and I'm up till 3 a.m. and I'm like, what did I just do? I feel dirty.
And the third?
So the third is, and there's a variation of the third. The third is Lees contact, Lees, Lees contact, which is a fancy word for just saying contact of the wine with its yeast cells.
Oh, yeast cells.
But there's a variation of Lees where you can actually accentuate that called batonnage. Batonnage. All right.
And so we talked a little bit about that during our French origins. So go, because I think this is the fascinating part. And for those of you that ever walked down a store aisle, don't think for a wine store aisle, not necessarily, Home Depot. Don't think for a second that the label isn't marketing to you based upon these things. There's a wine out there actually called butter. And so that is strictly what we're talking about here. Some of this imparts some information into the wine and imprints into it. But yeah, it's malolactic, oak, and on the lees.
And on the lees, or there's many different kind of ways to phrase that. Do you want me to brief those three areas?
I was just going to say, semi-geeky, what is malolactic fermentation?
Okay, hang on one second. Let me let Chef sit down because he come back. Do you need anything?
I wanted a napkin to wipe up.
Oh yeah,
the sauce is
in that
cool.
top drawer. Sorry, everybody. So we're doing this in our work office, and Chef came from the kitchen and brought the food down, and so we're sort of a little bit trying to manage it. Hold on one sec. Excuse me, everybody.
Okay, we're just looking at the drawer. This is riveting television. If this doesn't get
Yeah. Don't look at that drawer. That drawer is dirty.
is that contraband?
Stop. All right. So I got like 2 mics because I'm trying to get set up for Chef. All right. So let's talk about your question was MLF, right? So
Yeah, go a couple years to find malolactic fermentation.
Malolactic
Why
fermentation to
do
start
you
with.
have to have it?
You don't have to. First off, MLF is a winemaking technique that is done to most red wines in the world of wine. Almost every red wine, except for maybe Beaujolais, definitely Beaujolais Nouveau, never undergoes MLF. When we go to white wines, almost all white wines never undergo MLF, except for a very select few. One of them, Chardonnay, specifically Chardonnay from warmer climates. But what MLF is a conversion of a grape's or a wine's acidity. It is converting it from malic acid, hence the M, to lactic acid, hence the L, ML. And they call it malolactic fermentation. It's not a true fermentation. It's actually it's a different type, but they call it a fermentation. It is a conversion of acids from tart apple, green apple type of sour acid to a creamy, almost yogurt type of acid. And why do winemakers do it? Well, the reason they do it for Chardonnay is because it makes a better Chardonnay in theory, because it can soften some of those sharp, sour edges, make it a little bit softer, and makes the wine a little bit richer. And
rounder.
So the way that I think of it is as a shape. So like
Yep.
when I talk about malic acid, I use the shape of a triangle. If you were to put a triangle in your mouth, you would feel those those sharp corners, right? Hence malic acid, which is very typical of a Sauvignon Blanc. Okay, as an example, malic acid. Then when you undergo this process, you convert it to lactic acid, you're changing that acid almost to a circle, and it's more rounded. Those edges are gone. And because what you've got now is something that's softer, but also you've actually elevated the body a little bit. And in addition, one more thing, very, very important. When your wine undergoes MLF, you actually impart a new chemical compound that's created in the process called diacetyl or diacetyl, depends on who you ask. I'm not a scientist, but diacetyl, diacetyl, it creates the smell of butter. So if anybody out there has ever smelled a Chardonnay in your life, I'm guessing you've all smelled at least one, and you smell butter. Butter is the smell from the MLF process.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's MLF.
It's a chemical that's introduced via the process. Huh.
Yes.
So the butter actually only comes from the MLF process. None of that butter sensory awareness is imparted from the oak?
No. So here's the thing. So we talk about these three techniques. They're so critical. So in our program, in the wine program that we have here at Kendall called the Wine Professional Program, I spend a lot of time talking about Chardonnay. I'm not from the camp of ABC. I'm from the camp of like, let's learn what really sells. Let's learn what's really important out there in the marketplace. 3 winemaking techniques. MLF imparts the smell of butter and maybe elements of cream and custard. Barrel aging imparts elements of vanilla. And because the barrel is toasted, elements of baking spices, such as clove. Okay. Clove is a very common one. But then there's this other technique that wasn't mentioned. We mentioned it briefly in the list, lees aging and batonnage. So when you age the wine on the yeast cells or the lees, you're imparting now bread, sourdough, pizza dough. If you ever gone maybe to Trader Joe's and bought that raw pizza dough, that's like, just pick that up, smell that. That is going to be a smell that you can pick up in Chardonnay. And also the lees aging also gives you a hint of a toastiness, also coming from the barrel, but a hint of toastiness comes from lees aging as well. So when you think about those three techniques, that's really significant to shaping your given Chardonnay. And now in Chablis, what do you do? Do you do all of those things? If you do all three in Chablis, it's about subtle. It's about hands off, just a little bit, if any of that.
Yeah, it's not iron fist winemaking.
Exactly. And in Burgundy, it's more about balance. It's about using the right techniques, the right degree of those three techniques in line with what the grapes are giving you from their ripeness aspect. So that's about balance.
Chef, welcome back. So good to see you.
Hey, wait. I do that. Sorry.
I don't know if you got my postcard. We missed you. I do want to read Jeff before his chocolate or whatever birthday cake. He said, tonight we had yogurt marinated chicken with garlic sauce with the pistachio, lemon, cilantro, couscous, and chili roasted carrots. They tried both Chardonnays with it. They strongly preferred the Tonti, unoaked with this. We think it was because of the citrus and cilantro with the Tonti. Makes sense, John and Wook? What would you think?
I mean, I think so, definitely, because of just how everything is going to be within kind of that lightness. Cilantro tends to have a cooling effect. And so when you look at different types of foods that you want that nice, relaxing coolness, whether it's mint or coming from cilantro, I think it absolutely makes sense. John?
Yeah, agreed. Nothing else to add.
Awesome.
We got the dishes down anytime you're ready.
I was going to talk about that. I was going to say, first question I would like to know, Chef, how much of the dishes were prepared prior to when you left?
Actually, I made everything from scratch. I kid you not. As soon as I left, I got everything done.
That's impressive. I've been getting shortchanged on the dinner menus here at the home because if you whip that up in 20 minutes, there's 2 specific chicken recipes that are incredible. So walk us through both.
All right. So we're going to start with the first chicken dish number 1. And this one is intended to go with the Tonti for those of you out there that have the Tonti. So I recommend grab the Tonti now, smell it, sip on it, and let us explain the dish. And then we'll talk about why we pair the Tonti with it. All right. So
are we talking about
sure?
Are we talking about the top dish or the bottom dish?
Top.
Well,
in the camera.
Yeah, in the camera, the top dish. And when Chef talks about it, it'll kind of make sense what dish that is.
That's code for Martin. Shut up.
No.
So the first dish is the roast chicken with arugula and a lemon wine reduction. And so I wanted to keep the dish simple, kind of really how what you've mentioned earlier with the yogurt and the cilantro. And so for this dish, we use the lean meat, the white meat, and seasoned very simply with salt and pepper. And it was seared. So first it was pan seared in the saute pan, and then we finished it in the oven. So that's where you get the roasting. And that's going to be really critical because it's really going to create the Maillard reaction for the protein. So with that...
Hang on a second here. What is protein? I'm just kidding. What is the Maillard reaction?
So the Maillard reaction is what most proteins, it's the chemical reaction that protein will go under when it is really kind of next to high heat. So protein coagulates, and with the high heat of the Maillard reaction, usually anything above 300 degrees, and there's various degrees of temperature that I think most people will kind of argue, but usually anything above 300 degrees will really kind of create that crust. And so when you look at the dish right above, you can see the browning, and it's very different from burning. So anytime somebody is cooking something, there's a difference between browning and burning. Very similar to the caramelization that sugars go under.
No, that's
the Maillard reaction.
And fun fact, I saw the Maillard reaction at the Aragon Ballroom in the 80s. So different.
And so the sauce is going to have lemon juice, but it was reduced with the Tonti. So it had shallots, a little bit of fresh thyme, and it was reduced with the Tonti. And once it was reduced to au sec, so that translates to almost dry, that's when we added just a touch of heavy cream that's going to act as your binder. And then we finished it with copious amounts of butter to make it really tasty and delicious. Salt and pepper, of course. And then finished with lemon juice. And to continue with the simplicity, it was the arugula. And the
Listen.
arugula, the arugula, very simple vinaigrette, a lemon or a citronette, if you will, just a little bit of lemon juice, salt and pepper, and good quality extra virgin olive oil. That's your first dish.
That's dish one at the top.
Thank you. Thank you.
We don't have a clap applause track.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There we
that's
go.
Fantastic. The browning versus burning thing is critical. And so you've got a cast iron skillet that you're searing these in or something, and then you've got that measured so that it's not above 300?
Exactly. A good saute pan or anything really makes a huge difference, but it's really controlling the temperature like you've just mentioned. It's really controlling the heat. And, this could be another episode, right? But with the smoke that comes from the pan, it's literally giving you a smoke signal. So it's letting you know, hey, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. And so I used a stainless steel pan. The stainless steel pan is perfect. If you have a cast iron pan, that works even better. But stainless steel, most people have that. Aluminum pan is also perfect. The key thing is just understanding your stoves and understanding the heat.
That's awesome. That looks amazing, that dish.
Thank you.
So can we mention why we pair the Tonti with it?
Please.
So
that's what we sent you.
Because that was our option. So it went much better than that Napa cab that you sent as well. So
it's much better than the Jägermeister.
Malort. So listen, the Tonti Chard, when you compare the two together, there really is a big contrast in nose, in aromas and flavors and body. And so the Chardonnay in the style of the Tonti is being an unoaked and really it's not totally unoaked. It's free of new oak, which is important. They've used neutral oak on the Tonti. So neutral oak means they didn't impart all of those aromas and flavors associated with the toasting of a barrel. So it is a much more reserved version of a Chardonnay. And so what the goal was here was to showcase a dish that was chicken, but white meat chicken. White meat chicken is leaner. And that leanness is going to kind of bring it down to that level of body of the Tonti. Keep in mind the skin is on, but the skin, yes, it's giving you some fat, but it's really about texture and it's really about flavor. Okay.
No, I mean, if our Zoom upgrade came with smell-o-vision, those dishes look amazing, but we didn't pay for that upgrade.
I mean, we have that in Chicago. I don't know what you have in Florida, but we have that in Chicago here. So
that looks incredible. Just amazing. And the bottom dish.
All right.
Should I go?
Yeah, go.
All right. The next dish is a chicken roulade. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's a chicken roulade made with a mushroom risotto, as well as bacon tomato ragu. So the first one, when we talk about the ragu, ragu, think of it as a stew with pieces of meat and vegetables. And so that's where we have the bacon, and then we have shallots. And this is a demi-glace based stew. So this one, I used the other wine, so not the Tonti. And so that one, it was deglazed with it, and that was served with demi-glace, and that was finished with fresh herbs, tarragon, parsley, and then some fresh tomatoes. That's the sauce to go with the dark meat. So the chicken roulade, we've removed the thigh bone. So I'll switch the picture in a little bit, but the thigh is completely removed. And it was rolled, so you're going to have a cylindrical shape, and that's going to add a nice presentation element to the dish. And so once that was boned out, I wrapped it with a little bit of plastic wrap, foil. I poached it, and then once it was poached, I did ding, 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 our first technique, the saute. So I got a hot pan, and then I've roasted the chicken roulade. So then we get, Martin, do you remember the word of the day? Starts with an M and ends with a reaction.
It's a Mignard reaction.
Pretty close.
So we have the Maillard reaction that's going to help create the crust. And then that's going to really provide the nice extra chicken flavor that we want, especially with the dark bean. And then, of course, last but not least, we have our mushroom risotto that was also made with our white wine and butter and cheese. What type of cheese? Parmesan.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you made a mushroom risotto with a white wine, because normally I always picture that you're just stirring in some red wine, you're deglazing the pan with the red wine, and everything. And Nick Schramm is asking for a friend if there's any extra. Nick lives close enough that he can be at Kendall fairly soon. That is a fascinating dish. Honest to goodness, Chef, prep time, cook time. What are we looking at here?
So one note, I'm glad you pointed it out, and I will show you in the picture, is that I did add a little drumette from the chicken wing. I've shaped it into like a drumstick, and so a little element of fried chicken is on the dish too, and that's going to create an extra oomph because I love fried chicken. And from start to finish, I would say prep time, you're looking at about an hour.
Okay. And so that little drumette of chicken, is that going to give you your fried chicken crunchiness?
You got it.
Oh boy, look at that savoriness.
So if anybody has followed our Instagram at feeding.the.soul365, one of our recent episodes was all about comfort food. And we learned that Chef's favorite go-to comfort food is fried chicken. Even some of the worst kind of fried chicken, any fried chicken. So it sort of carries through to some of his themes when he does dishes.
That is awesome. And it's a good
The
comfort
artist.
food.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a good, someone's asking, would you even eat Popeyes?
Of course.
What's another alternative there? Can you give that one?
KFC,
right.
Brown's
Oh,
chicken.
Nick Schramm. Yes, the dirtier the better.
So please give our episode a listen on comfort foods. And
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so now you've moved the dishes around. That is just a work of art.
Yeah. So, Chef, do you want to actually cut through the first one?
I brought some silverware.
Okay. So what we're gonna do is cut through the first dish, just so you can kind of see how it looks, and hopefully we want to make you, we want you to love us, but we want to make you a little jealous. Maybe come to us, reach out to us. We like to just cook food all the time and drink wine. And
as John and Chef are cutting
a little bit more that way.
Denise is going to turn on
Go
the
ahead.
cameras if nobody wants to turn their cameras on to interact.
Yeah. So right now, Chef is cutting through that first dish. You see the arugula on top, and really the arugula is funny. The reason Chef went with arugula is because arugula it's a green. There's a little bit of texture, a little bit of flavor, but it's really a vehicle for carrying the sauce that it was dressed with, which is really just quite simple of lemon juice and a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper. So you see him cutting that through right now. Chef, hold a piece when you cut, hold it up to the camera a little bit so they can see it. Yeah,
good.
you can see it. Good. Good. And so remember, folks, we did, that's chicken breast. And the reason it's chicken breast is because it's leaner, right? So you got a leaner wine with a Tonti. The whole concept here of this dish was to kind of convey a sense of freshness too, right? The greens are conveying freshness. All right. Arugula gives you a little bit of pepperiness. And in the Tonti wine, you've got an element of freshness here. It's all about hands off, a little bit of a leaner expression of a Chardonnay, right? So, I want you to taste it, and I want you to taste it with the Tonti.
Oh, I tasted it already.
Chef, sorry, I've already tasted it multiple times. We did a tasting already. We did this already, but I'm trying to get Chef fat.
I think it's interesting too that you mentioned the arugula is a vehicle to carry the sauce. That is that's very nice.
Yeah, and it's also because my mom wants me to have more greens in my diet. It's good. It's fiber. So she cares about me in that way. All right, so Chef cut this for me. Isn't that sweet? I have a co-host who actually cuts the food for me, and yeah. All right.
Skin in there.
So hang on. No, hang on. I got it. I'm getting there. a second. Hang on. So here we go. So chicken, a little bit of skin on, but it's white meat, a little bit of arugula. It's got that sauce on it. Okay.
Peter Glick is 10 minutes away and counting. He's moving very quickly. He's 9 now. He's 8.5 out. He knows exactly what room you're in the college.
All right.
Now you're eating in front of us.
I'm eating. And now I'm going to take a taste of the Tonti wine.
Oh, and we haven't even talked about the Knightsbridge wine, and we haven't even done Google Earth yet. I'm not going to disappoint the birthday boy and not do Google Earth. Are you kidding me?
So awesome. Sorry. So awesome with this Tonti. That sort of citrus, tree fruit really comes out. And it's really kind of bridging those characteristics that Chef has in there with the sauce, also with the way the greens are dressed. And yeah, I mean, it's a balance. When we talk about wine and food pairing, key characteristic is mirroring weight body of both the wine and the dish. In theory, the idea of a modern day partnership, right? Both co-equal, coexist, no one overpowers one another. Second characteristic is kind of looking at some of the structural components. The sauce has some richness. That wine has a really healthy edge of acidity, kind of works to kind of cut one another and actually provide harmony. And then the third aspect is about bridging aromas and flavors, which clearly is there with that citrus fruit characteristic. All right, Chef, second dish. All right, we got the second dish coming in. Did you want to do Google Earth while he's cutting the second dish, or
do I?
It's up to you. Totally you.
Julie Fogarty.
Oh no, there's the dish.
Google Earth.
You're gonna Google Earth Kendall College.
No.
Everyone can show up.
Yeah, everyone, exactly. So we can just use Waze and show up to exactly where Chef is now cutting.
You need to do your COVID protocol first, okay? All right, so we got the second dish here. Second dish. All right. I know it's 8:07 and there is a time limit. All right, this is amazing.
11 p.m. tonight.
All right, right here. So this is Chef Wook. This is love. This is love. That's what this is, okay? I'm gonna put that one aside.
It looks like a puff pastry of fried chicken.
Oh, that's fine. It could, yeah, okay.
I mean, it looks amazing.
Smells good. All right, so now
you're doing this with the Knightsbridge?
Now we're gonna do this with the Knightsbridge. So I've got thigh meat, dark meat chicken. Dark meat chicken has more fat to it, more juice, more flavor, more oomph, because that wine has got more oomph. That's a technical term, by the way. Can you all say that? Oomph. Yes, all right. So I've got the chicken here, and I'm kind of swirling it there in the sauce, and I'm going to put a little bit of that risotto on here. All right. And what I've got is a fork full of richness right now. The idea of building richness is not just the protein and the type of protein, the fact that it's dark meat. It's also the fact that it's got accoutrements that have, what is it? Oomph as well. Risotto is a creaminess. It's a richness. So that's kind of adding an element.
Cooking and French lessons this evening on Cellar Angels Sip. Oomph. And grunts and wrestling terminology.
And it's perfect. We've hit three I mean, right away, you can just tell. When the food hits your mouth, you get an idea of how it's filling up your mouth and how it's coating your mouth. You take a swig of that wine, you feel the weight of the wine, and it's right there. It's not being lost. The food isn't lost. The wine isn't lost. When we talk about principles of wine and food pairing, obviously I talk about it in like 2 chapters in my textbook, but the major factor is principle 1. Wine and food need to mirror one another. It's about modern day partnership. Both coexist. Both are co-equal. One doesn't boom, overpower the other. Okay. I don't know what I just said, but I think you get what I mean.
I like what Hans and Caitlin wrote.
What did Hans and Caitlin write?
Try and then you end with
And you also said boom, boom, and I'm thinking of the Ray Mancini song. So that's how old I am. Chef, the chicken.
Wait a second.
Yeah, crickets.
Sorry.
Jeff Greasy, do not encourage them. Chef,
yes.
the chicken that you made, the chicken bone that you popsicle, that technique, can anybody do that at home, or is that the advanced degree?
No, anybody can do that at home. So you want to use the wing flap. So the wing usually have 3 pieces to it. So you have the wing tip, and then you're going to have the flap, and then the drumette closest to the breast,
right,
the head, if you will. And so it's really, I use the wing flap, and there's 2 bones, and pick your bone, if you will, and you want to remove one of them, and then everything else will just easily slide down with a little Oomph.
So basically
right.
what Chef just said, he said, come and take a class at Kendall.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I am, much to Julie's chagrin, going to show you exactly what we're talking about with these two wines, because I think it's important what John talked about and set the foundation for early on. Cool climate, warmer climate. And the irony is that you don't just have to compare and contrast Chablis with California. You can get cool climate and warmer climate very close to each other within California. So let's take a look at what we're looking for with cool climate on these specific wines tonight. So there you obviously see, interestingly enough, a crooked earth. It's on its axis, but might be fitting. As many of you know, some of you are new tonight, Cellar Angels is a direct-to-consumer wine company. We only focus on one wine region, and it's Napa and Sonoma. So all of the wines we curate on the website are directly from Napa and Sonoma, including, interestingly enough, the wine that we're having tonight in the Tonti is actually from Mendocino. So you've got Napa County right here. You've got Sonoma County right here. And north of Sonoma County is this rather large county called Mendocino. Mendocino, very, very rugged county, closer to the coast. And the wine region that we're specifically looking at is Redwood Valley, and it's right here. So as we zoom in, if you've ever been up to Ukiah, Boonville, Philo, we did a video shoot out here for Philo for Drew Winery, which was insane, the amount of fog I saw out there. But this is Mendocino, and this is the Redwood Valley AVA. So in here you have tremendous topography. You've got a river. We always talk about maritime influences. We always talk about water influences. And as you saw a couple of weeks ago, if you haven't, all of this was underwater 35 million years ago. So similar to what Chablis has, there are elements here that you will find as the erosion sets in, crustaceans. You will find shell fragments, and you have a lot of that imparting nutrient and different things into the soil that the grapes all benefit from, or the vine all benefit from. This is where the Tonti is sourced from. The Knights Valley is actually, I'm going to pan out a little bit to give you an idea, because this is the cool weather climate. Knights Valley is not that far away right here. So in Sonoma County, this is warmer, cooler over here. So very, very close to each other, probably about not too dissimilar to Chablis to Montrachet. You know, Chablis is cool, the regular other white Morceau, Montrachet of Burgundy, a little bit warmer, cooler up here, closer to the Pacific. Knights Valley, one of the warmer areas of Sonoma.
And one of the farthest east.
And one of the farthest east. And as I've said for years, all these wineries right here, if this little line demarcating the valley went this way around those wineries, these wines would be 3 times more expensive, because then they could put Napa on the valley, on the label rather. So it's interesting when you see the amount of wines down here in Knights Valley. There are some very, very, very famous folks that are sourcing wine from this area right here. We've talked for a long time at Cellar Angels over the years about the value of sourcing wines from Coombsville on the southern end. And a lot of the big boys, whether it's the Opuses, the Insignias, the Duckhorns, the Quintessas, a lot of them were sourcing from Coombsville. There's a lot of folks in here sourcing from Knights Valley for both Cabernet and the white wine. And when you look specifically where Knightsbridge is, they've got a little bit of the best of both worlds. Because not only do they have some aspect of valley floor and different rows to go in different directions, east, west, north, south, they also have over here beautiful terraced, steep hillside vineyards as well. And the soil that they have, it almost looks like you are in Chablis, because it is that white, chalky, rhyolite type of mineral rich, intense white rock, not that you see in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and Nebraska farm country with that black, rich nitrogen dirt. This is a beautiful, spectacular property. And as John said, very far east in Sonoma, very far north, and also one of the warmer climates from Sonoma County. But it is a spectacularly gorgeous area, as is Mendocino, by the way. in Mendocino County, because you are up there quite a ways, but there is just some spectacular wineries up there and some spectacular vineyard sources. And this is where tonight, comparing and contrasting the Tonti from Mendocino, the Knightsbridge from Sonoma in the Knights Valley region, and absolutely two rock star dishes from Chef. So Chef, I don't have an applause track, but
I
really
got it. I got it.
Thanks, everybody.
Chef
Thank you.
Wook.
And then is this, I'd be curious, John and Chef, tell me some of the subject matter on feeding the soul. Is it like this, or where do you go? What's the content?
Get the title of our recent one. Can you pull it up? Yeah. So we have, what are we, 8, 9 episodes in. We're basically doing one every 2 weeks. And we'd love you to go to the Instagram page and check us out. And in our profile on Instagram, it actually leads to our site where you can listen to the full episodes. We have a lot of teaser episodes on our Instagram page, which is feeding.the.soul365. The first episode we did, it was an origin story. It was really about why we're doing this podcast, what it means to us, and how food has become and drink have become really valuable in our careers. We both have spent our entire adult and even less, because we both started young, lives focused around food and drink. Our second episode was all about fried rice, and it was the authenticity of fried rice. So if anyone's a fan of fried rice, then we did actually a fried rice competition to anybody who wanted to take a part, and we had a prize for the winning fried rice. Our third episode was kind of in line with National Irish Coffee Day. So we talked all about the Irish coffee, a very favorite of mine, and I introduced it to Chef, and we actually did a little bit of our portion on site of a pretty famous Chicago bar, Irish bar. Our next episode was Legends of the Steakhouse. It was all about kind of the historical elements and value of the steakhouse, famous cuts. Then we did a really fun episode on Valentine's Day.
I really like that one.
Yeah, Valentine's Day was completely unscripted. We just sort of riffed on Valentine's Day. Chef loves Valentine's Day. I don't. So it was a really funny conversation. We did one on steaks and chops, really taking Legends of the Steakhouse and diving in more deep. And then we did baking bread with Chef Tom of Escoffier Online School. And then our most recent one is Comfort Foods, which is kind of a funny title, actually. Do you remember the title?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I remember this title. If it's Comfort Foods by Chef Wook, it's all the chicken you can eat and then some.
That's right. That's right. It was the comfort food. The title also included, what was it? Manic Mondays and bad hair days.
Something, whatever. We tried
like
to do
it.
something a little unconventional and yet something that we can all relate as people, as humans, right? Maybe
Well,
dogs.
I wanna-
I don't know.
Ask if anybody has any questions. You can certainly unmute yourself and ask a question of John from a wine standpoint, or Chef from a food prep cooking origin standpoint. If you hear knocks on the door, I'm guessing that might be either Peter Glick or Nick Schramm looking for additional food. They're the closest, I believe. So if anybody has any questions, you can throw them in the chat, or unmute your microphone. What is the next episode, John?
Our next episode is with Cellar Angels, and it's Sip Chardonnay. But no, our next one that we're actually just the two of us are doing is on scent, actually smell, and the connection to emotions. And after that, we've actually got another one where we're doing smoking. No, not that smoking. We're actually smoking food. So smoked meat, specifically a brisket.
Big fan.
That's what we got in the future.
Gladys has a question.
Yes.
What is the difference? I cook a lot with wine, and what is the difference with cooking with the wine in a box? I mean, I don't like to use like a really good wine from the bottle. I rather go and buy the one from the box, and I use it for cooking. What's the difference? So is the same process as the other one, or is the same?
You can answer this.
That's a great question.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, to paraphrase,
Yeah.
Do you want to use high quality wine, or can wine in a box be used? And what is the difference that it may impart in the dish between higher quality wine and wine in a box.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and start it off. Go ahead and
Okay.
start off, then I'll add.
Well, I usually there's a lot of adages, right? And I think I think a lot of things have changed over the years. One that I hear a lot, and I don't know if it's always true, and I know John will probably correct me on it, is that you shouldn't cook always with the wine that you want to drink with. And I hear a lot of
or you shouldn't.
you shouldn't.
Oh,
And I hear a lot of chefs say that more than anything. I think from the chef's perspective, hey, if you're gonna cook with it, why not just use a boxed wine? Really, just because if you want the acidity. But sometimes I disagree with that, which I think you're
I
gonna agree
completely
with.
disagree with. So my thought on it, and I did write an article on this, and I did a little bit of research on it. Maybe the article was out, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, but it was all about the quality of your food. Is the end of it is only going to be as good as the quality of your ingredients. Now, with that being said, if you just open up a $100, $200 bottle of whatever, I'm not necessarily saying use 1/4 of that in your cooking. What I'm saying is maybe buy similar varietal, similar location, but an alternative version or a less expensive version. But if you're only using the cheapest rot gut box wine that you can find, the finished
Too much,
dishes, where's the love? I don't know. I mean, I understand from an economical standpoint that makes
Maybe-
sense.
Maybe the in-laws are coming over.
No, well, I usually buy, the one that they usually sell in Mariano, so the Chardonnay brand. So that's the one that I usually, because I don't want to use the one from the bottle. So I just
Yeah. So keep in mind, box wine is not necessarily bad, because there are some producers nowadays that have said, you know what, screw the whole idea of box wine is bad wine. There are some producers that have elevated the quality of the grapes and the quality of the wine, and they are doing varietal based wines in boxes. So that's not the worst thing in the world. That's okay. But it's when you're buying the box wine that has nondescript varietal and it's falsely labeled Chablis after the famous Chablis, but it has nothing to do with Chablis. That's the ones where I kind of draw the line. It's like,
And Chablis is spelled wrong. That's a dead
lowercase, or it says California Chablis. Like that's where I kind of draw the line for me for cooking. But in a kitchen,
John, to your point,
sometimes it's about cost. It's about food cost. So you do what you do.
Isn't the same fermentation, the one from the box?
Yeah, it's not about fermentation. It's really about the quality of the ingredients in the box. So you can find Chardonnay growing everywhere, but what do you choose to actually bottle? What do you choose to put in a box? The stuff that's the maybe lesser ideal growing location, maybe the second picking or the less desirable Chardonnay might be going into the box, and the better stuff might be going into the bottle, keeping in mind that there are some producers out there doing box wines with better quality nowadays, but historically, no, it wasn't that true.
Right,
and there was,
it's all
go
in
ahead,
the
I'm
food.
sorry, Gladys.
It's all in the food. It's how you're cooking. So it still turned out to be good.
Yep. And to John's point, box wines have always not enjoyed a stigma of positivity with regards to quality. However, within the last 5 years, during some of the ups and downs of the wine market, when there's a glut in the wine industry at the producer side, they will sell tons of bulk juice to the Costco's, to the large box stores, and they will box very, very famous Chardonnay and very, very famous red wine that you would know the name of, and they've sold it off as bulk. So it's not necessarily what it once used to be from a negative stigmatization. Any other questions? Someone who wants to know really how old is Jeff?
What a question.
I'm teasing, Jeff. No one asked that. It's a very inquisitive crowd. I want to give a giant shout out and warm Cellar Angels appreciation to Chef and John for this evening. Thank you very much. Those were two amazing dishes. That was incredible. Special people tonight, John and Chef, thank you so much. I want to tell you a little bit about next week, because I think you're going to be in for a treat. For those of you that are familiar with the great wine out of Napa Valley called Quintessa, it was launched by a woman named Bettina Seychelles. And Bettina and I met at a restaurant years ago up in Highwood at a Quintessa dinner. And we've followed her career for a while, because when you think about it, Quintessa was launched in 1998 as a national brand. Fun fact, Bettina's grandfather was the pioneer behind Blue Nun Riesling. So they have wine in their veins. It was the bottle that every single one of us grew up with in the fridge, because it was always in the door of the refrigerator. That's why we all don't like Riesling, which is a shame. But Bettina now is the owner and general manager of a fantastic winery in Sonoma called Laurel Glen. 100% organically farmed, and they have the fantastic and world-renowned Phil Couturi as their vineyard manager. And Phil is just amazing stories. But next week is going to be in for a treat. And we went a little bit over. Thank you all for staying with us this evening. Just amazing to have food and wine brought to life, really, in the form of this episode and Chef's amazing skill. That is fantastic. Everyone, thanks so much for your participation. Can't do this without you. Be good to one another. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe.